Welcome to AI Paper Podcasts. We're diving into a really interesting paper today called Wanting to be Understood from Google DeepMind.
Yeah, Griselda Fernando, Dylan Benares, and Simon Osendero.
Right, and the core idea, just for that quick summary up front, it seems this fundamental drive for reciprocal understanding, not just being curious yourself, but wanting others to get you to, might be key for social interaction in AI.
Exactly. They used reinforcement learning agents in this specific setup called the Perceptual crossing paradigm.
And they basically tested different internal rewards, things linked to curiosity, imitation, influence.
And the big finding really points towards rewarding that mutual reciprocal understanding is the thing that properly drives social connection and even helps with cooperation, not just, individual curiosity exploring the world.
So let's get into it. For you listening, maybe you're an AI researcher, an ML engineer, this paper, it offers a pretty fresh perspective, I think.
Definitely. We spend so much time thinking about external rewards, right? Train an agent to win a game, achieve a target. This work says, well, maybe these deep intrinsic drives like wanting to connect and be understood are just as vital.
Especially if we want to build AI that's genuinely social, that can collaborate in more, human-like ways.
Okay, so the hypothesis at the heart of it. It's this idea that we humans, and maybe some other primates, we don't just want to understand others. We have this innate need to be understood.
Like for others to grasp our goals, our values, maybe even our internal world model.
Yeah, exactly. And they argue this drive is what underpins those very first social moments. Primary intersubjectivity, like a baby and caregiver locking eyes.
And then later, it feels more complex stuff, like joint attention, looking at the same thing, sharing context, secondary intersubjectivity.
And they bring in this quite compelling evolutionary angle, the Baldwin effect.
Right, the idea that learned behaviors, if they give a big advantage, can sort of pave the way for genetic predisposition over time.
Precisely. So back in the Paleolithic, coordinating was, essential for survival. That offered extrinsic rewards, obviously.
Food, safety, the works.
But maybe, over time, this need for mutual understanding became its own reward, an intrinsic thing for the sake of it, almost.
Wow. So predating complex language even, this basic ability to get on the same page.
Could be. They suggest it might have been crucial for bootstrapping language, art, culture, all of it.
And, okay, this is where it gets a bit philosophical. They even link it to the hard problem of consciousness.
Yeah, it's a fascinating connection. Why do we try so hard to explain our subjective experience, our qualia like, what red feels like to someone else?
Even though we know perfect transmission is basically impossible, right?
Yeah.
Bandwidth limits and all that, why bother?
It suggests a really deep drive. And this ties into what the researchers are really trying to model. They're less interested in agents just learning predefined language games with set rules and rewards.
They want to know what intrinsic motivations could make agents actually invent communication, driven by this need to connect and be understood.
But crucially, and this is important for you engineers listening, any proposed motivation has to be biologically plausible.
Meaning
the agent can only rely on its own stuff, its observations, its actions, its predictions, its internal states. No mind reading allowed.
Yes. Okay, no direct access to the other agent's thoughts. Makes sense.
And they also wanted motivations that aren't super complex computationally. No heavy-duty counterfactual reasoning, because we see social drives kicking in really early in babies before they can do that kind of thinking.
Right. Which leads us to the experimental setup,
the perceptual crossing paradigm, PCP.
Describe that for us. It sounds simple, but the dynamics seem key.
It really is simple on the surface. Imagine two agents like little avatars on a 1D line, but it's circular, like a ring.
Okay.
They can do three things: move left, move right, or stay still. That's it for actions.
And to get feedback.
Yeah, they get a buzz sensation. This happens when an avatar crosses over another avatar or over its own private stationary object placed somewhere on the ring.
Okay, like a landmark just for them.
Exactly. Or, and this is clever, when it crosses the other avatar's shadow.
Shadow? What's that?
It's just a point on the ring that's a fixed offset, like 0.2 units away from the other avatar's actual position.
Ah, okay, so you can interact with the other agent directly or with this kind of echo of them.
Right, and the key thing about the buzz is usually only the agent doing the crossing feels it. If I cross your shadow, only I get the buzz.
But not when the avatars themselves cross.
That's the exception.
Yeah.
When the avatars actually cross each other, both feel the buzz. That's the only truly mutual event.
Interesting. So the shadow crossing is a one-way interaction signal.
Precisely. And what's cool is when they put actual humans in this setup years ago, people spontaneously develop social strategies.
What?
Turn-taking emerges. They even do these little coordinated movements, like dances almost. It shows people prefer interacting with the other person, not just the static object or the shadow.
So there's something inherently rewarding about that mutual interaction.
Seems like it. But simulating this has been tricky. A lot of previous AI work kind of cheated, you could say.
So?
They used fitness functions or rewards that already assumed interaction was good, like rewarding agents just for being near each other. The policies learned were sort of overfitted to that assumption.
So this paper wanted to find intrinsic motivations that would lead to that preference naturally without building it in beforehand.
Exactly. Let the preference emerge from the drive.
Okay, so first step, model just understanding the environment. Artificial curiosity.
Right. Each agent gets an LSTM, a type of neural network good at sequences. It tries to predict the next crossing event, what will I cross next, and also how confident it is in that prediction.
And the reward. How does that encourage curiosity?
It's a bit nuanced. It rewards minimizing prediction errors when confidence is low. Basically, learn about stuff you don't understand. But it gives exponentially bigger rewards for errors when confidence was high.
So it really rewards being surprised, finding out you were confidently wrong.
Exactly. That encourages seeking out the truly unpredictable bits of the environment.
And what happened? Did pure curiosity make them social?
Well, it definitely drove exploration. The agents learned to interact with predictable things, like their own static object crossing and uncrossing it, learning its pattern.
Okay, mastering the simple stuff.
But, and this is the key bit, it didn't really lead to a strong, clear preference for interacting with the other agent. Curiosity alone wasn't enough to make them seek each other out specifically.
Interesting. So just wanting to reduce surprise isn't the same as wanting social connection.
Doesn't seem to be, no. Which brings us to their core idea. Modeling that drive to be understood.
Yeah.
They tried 3 angles on this.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first was about imitation, the drive to imitate and be imitated by.
So rewarding mimicry.
Pretty much. Agents got rewarded if they did something, and then the other agent copied it shortly after that, encourages being imitated. And they also got rewarded for copying what the other agent just did. That's the imitation reward itself.
How did they track that?
They looked at the recent interaction history, like the last 10 time steps, comparing patterns of crossings in the first half versus the second half, looking for those reciprocal sequences.
The result.
It worked. It led to a really strong preference for self-other crossings. The agents fell into these quite stereotype patterns, like repeatedly crossing and uncrossing each other.
Like a simple dance generated by the reward for mutual imitation.
Kind of, yeah. Much more interaction with each other than with the static object or the shadow.
Okay, that's one way to view being understood through imitation. What was the second angle?
This one was broader. Influence and impressionability.
Influence and impressionability. So affecting others and letting them affect you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They used mutual information as the measure here. Think of it as how much does knowing what I just did tell me about what you're about to observe? That's influence.
Okay.
And the flip side, how much does observing what you just did tell me about what action I'm likely to take next? That's being impressionable, reacting to the other.
So reward agents for maximizing both.
Oh, yes. Maximize the mutual information in both directions, my actions influencing your observations, and your actions influencing my subsequent actions. They use a rolling buffer of recent history to calculate this.
And this led to?
Also a strong preference for self-other crossings.
Yeah.
But the interaction patterns were less rigid, less stereotyped than pure imitation.
More exploratory, maybe?
Yeah, it seemed like they were more actively trying to figure each other out, to see how their actions systematically affected the other, and vice versa.
Right.
Really probing to increase that mutual information.
Trying to build a model of the interaction itself.
Feels like it. And interestingly, they did a test where they only rewarded influence trying to affect the other, and took away the reward for being impressionable.
And did interaction drop?
Surprisingly, in this specific PCP setup, it didn't significantly reduce the amount of self-other crossing. Just rewarding influence was enough to keep them interacting a lot. We'll come back to why impressionability might still be important later, though.
Okay. And the third way they modeled being understood?
This was called sub-reaction time anticipation. It built on the influence impressionability idea.
How?
Same mutual information reward system, but they introduced a small delay, just 2 time steps between an agent making an observation and being able to act on it.
So forcing them to predict or anticipate rather than just react instantly.
Exactly. Can you still influence and be influenced effectively if there's a lag? If you can, it suggests you're implicitly anticipating the other's moves.
And could they?
Yeah, remarkably, they still showed a strong preference for self-other crossings. They learned to move together, coordinate, and anticipate, even with that slight handicap.
That's pretty compelling evidence for the power of that mutual information drive.
It really is. It suggests it captures something fundamental about coordinating actions.
So, okay, they showed these intrinsic drives lead to interaction, but does it actually help with anything? Like, does it facilitate cooperation?
Great question. That's what they tested next with a simple cooperation task.
Please set it up for us.
Okay, 2 agents again. Agent 0 gets a private signal, either +1 or -1. Agent 0 only gets rewarded if Agent 1 ends up in the correct half of the circular track, top half for +1, bottom half for -1.
And Agent 1, what's its reward?
Nothing directly related to the task. Agent 1 gets no signal and no extrinsic reward based on its position. Its only reward comes from the intrinsic motivation system being tested.
So Agent 0 has the goal, but Agent 1 has no obvious reason to help unless its intrinsic drive aligns with cooperating.
Precisely. Agent 0 needs to somehow influence Agent 1 to go to the right place.
And what happened when they used the influence and impressionability reward?
It worked. Agent 0, driven by the need to influence and be influenced, learned to interact with Agent 1 in a way that guided it to the correct region based on the hidden signal.
Wow, so the intrinsic drive enabled teaching, essentially.
Kind of, yeah. But when they ran the same task without that intrinsic motivation for mutual understanding.
Let me guess, Agent 1 just wandered randomly.
Pretty much. Agent 1 didn't cooperate. It had no intrinsic reason to pay attention to Agent 0's attempts to influence it.
And what about that earlier finding where just rewarding influence seemed okay? Did that hold up here?
Ah, good point. Here it didn't. When they removed the reward for being impressionable in this cooperation task, Agent's ability to guide Agent 1 got worse.
So in this asymmetric task where one agent needs to learn from the other, being open to influence being impressionable actually matters quite a bit.
Exactly. It highlights that both sides of that mutual information coin, influencing and being influenced, might be important, especially in scenarios that involve learning or guidance.
Okay, so stepping back, the big picture here seems to be, well, rewarding this drive for reciprocal understanding looks really important for getting AI agents to interact socially.
Yeah, it seems much more effective than just rewarding basic curiosity about the environment. Curiosity gets them exploring, but this mutual drive gets them connecting.
And the work provides some, computationally plausible ways to implement these intrinsic drives, ways that could potentially underlie those very early forms of social connection we see in humans.
Primary intersubjectivity, yeah. And the fact that these simple drives led to emergent coordination, even cooperation, suggests that agents driven this way can kind of implicitly reward each other.
Which could be a stepping stone towards inventing more complex communication, new language games down the line.
It's a potential pathway, definitely.
Now, they're upfront about limitations too, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. They point out the mutual information calculation they used is pretty specific to this PCP environment.
And the features used for that calculation were handpicked, not learned.
Right, so future work could look at maybe calculating mutual information deeper within the neural networks, perhaps using inverse models.
We're seeing if policies learned by agents trained together generalize when they meet totally new partners.
That's a big one. Agent general policies, and also testing these AI agents against actual humans in the PCP. That would be fascinating.
What happens if agents have mismatched ways of calculating mutual understanding? Could that cause problems?
That's another really interesting open question they raise. And they also suggest exploring intrinsic rewards that could maybe access hidden neural states more directly as a more explicit way to signal, I understand you.
Lots of avenues for future research then.
Definitely.
So wrapping up this deep dive on wanting to be understood, the key insight for me is the power of designing for reciprocal understanding, not just individual agent goals or exploration.
Absolutely. That drive seems potent for fostering social interaction, coordination, maybe even laying the groundwork for cooperation in AI. The perceptual crossing paradigm, despite its simplicity, turns out to be a really useful little sandbox for studying these deep drives.
And for you, our listeners in AI and ML, the takeaway is maybe thinking beyond just extrinsic rewards. Consider how incorporating these intrinsic social motivations might lead to AI that feels more natural, interacts more effectively, and collaborates more readily.
It's a computational take on that fundamental human need to connect, really.
Okay, here's a final thought to leave you with. Could this drive, this wanting to be understood, be more than just a component of sociality? Could it be a fundamental building block needed for more advanced AGI? Intelligence that can truly interact with us, understand us, and collaborate.
What does it mean for designing future AI if we take these deep-seated motivations seriously from the start?
Something to think about. We really encourage you to check out the full paper for all the technical details and the author's own discussion. It's thought-provoking stuff.
Definitely worth the read. Consider how these ideas might spark something in your own research.